Starting in 1977, Marvel Comics had a series that looked how the destinies of their heroes could be changed with just one tiny alteration of their storyline. Obviously, the series was called What If?
Like I said, the series took a look at the possible stories that could have resulted from a character taking a divergent path. Notable issues included: what if the Avengers had never been? What if the Phoenix had not died? And what if the alien costume had possessed Spider-Man?
Unfortunately, the series was so tied into Marvel continuity that creators began to run out of ideas. I mean, it's one thing to do What If Elektra Had Lived? It's another thing to do What If Rogue Had the Power of Thor? This would lead to the publication of a humor book titled What the?
What If would be revived a couple of times throughout the 90s, but neither of those incarnations would capture the mind of comic fans like the original had.
In 2005, Marvel Comics would revive What If in a series of one-shot stories that would eventually be collected in a trade titled What If? Why Not? And that's what we're looking at today. Now, I should point out that some of these stories do follow the What If tradition of having a separate character, namely Uatu the Watcher, introducing the stories. But I'm actually going to be doing my own introductions to these stories, so I'm just going to skip over the intros. Anyway, let's begin. What if? Why not? In a storyline titled Guardian Devil, Matt Murdock's longtime girlfriend, Karen Page, was killed at the hands of the assassin Bullseye. This would drive Matt into a near-suicidal depression. But let's say things turned out differently. This is What If Karen Page Had Lived?
Bullseye picks up Daredevil's trademark billy club and launches it at Karen. It strikes her. However, the assassin is unusually off target and Karen is left gravely wounded, but alive. Matt drops Karen off at the hospital where her condition is stable. He then goes after the mastermind behind the situation, Quentin Beck. Beck had deduced Matt's identity as Daredevil and purchased more information from Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. Daredevil then went on to confront Fisk. The two got into a physical confrontation. Finally, Daredevil launched the same billy club that almost killed Karen at Fisk. It struck Fisk in the neck, killing him instantly. Matt intended to turn himself in, except Wilson Fisk's lawyer showed up at the police department first with documents pointing the finger at Matt and outing him as Daredevil in the process. In the ensuing trial, several heroes testify on Matt's behalf, but it's not enough and he's found guilty. As Matt sits in prison, Karen moves away and the two never speak again. Eventually, Matt Murdock is paroled. It doesn't really matter though. Everyone he knows is gone and Matt is left to walk the streets alone.
You know the story. Just as Dr. Bruce Banner was about to test his new gamma radiation bomb, he spotted teenager Rick Jones on the testing grounds. Except this time, Dr. Banner isn't the one to confront Rick. This is What If Thunderbolt Ross Became the Hulk?
Bruce Banner spots the young man sitting outside in a jeep. He starts to leave, only to be stopped by General Ross. This is a military matter, so the military will take care of it. After Ross leaves, Banner's assistant Igor begins spraying a knockout gas. He's really a Russian spy. Meanwhile, General Ross grabs Rick when he realizes that the bomb is actually going to still go off. He tosses Rick into a nearby ditch just as the explosion happens. Almost instantly, Ross transforms into the Hulk, crushing Rick to death in the process.
Now I know what you're thinking. This is ridiculous. I mean, General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross becoming the Hulk? Like that would ever happen. I mean, it's almost as if they took issue 10 of the original What If series, where Jane Foster gained the powers of Thor, and put that into mainstream continuity. Jane Foster as Thor. That would never, ever happen.
Ross goes on a rampage throughout the city, crushing Igor's car in the process. Meanwhile, Banner and the others come too, and just as Banner begins to piece things together, a report comes in about Betty Ross being terrorized by a large, hulking creature. The military sends out a tank and helicopter to take the creature down, but the transformed general makes quick work of the tank, ripping it in half and throwing it away. Ross then takes down the chopper. Ross then makes his way back to his home, only to discover the tank he threw away before has crushed the house. Banner is waiting and he confirms that Betty was inside. She was just coming out to greet Bruce when the tank landed. Realizing what he has done causes Ross to revert back to normal. Banner then takes out a gun and puts the general out of his misery.
Jessica Jones was a teenage superhero named Jewel who fell under the mind-controlling thrall of Zebediah Kilgrave, the Purple Man. While under the Purple Man's control, Jessica had an encounter with the Avengers that left her beaten to within an inch of her life. The Avengers visited Jessica in the hospital and made a peace offering to allow her to join the team and learn under them. But she rejected that offer, instead becoming a private investigator. Or maybe she changed her mind. This is What If Jessica Jones joined the Avengers?
After Jessica left the hospital, she received a visit from Captain America. He asked Jessica to reconsider and pointed out that the Avengers really helped him reintegrate back into society after he'd been frozen for almost 20 years. He then makes Jessica an offer to be a S.H.I.E.L.D. liaison for the team. She reluctantly accepts and moves into Avengers Mansion a few days later. Over time, Jessica finds a home with the team, even going on a few adventures with them. She also begins growing closer to Cap. After one mission, Jessica noticed voices coming from the room of the Scarlet Witch. She looked in to only find Wanda sitting alone. Jessica went to Cap with her concerns. Because of Jessica's actions, the events of Avengers Disassembled and House of M never occurred. Afterwards, Cap and Jessica talk and admit their feelings for each other, and the two wind up getting married.
As you are well aware, Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto are longtime friends turned rivals due to their differing beliefs on the relationship between humans and mutants. But let's say Charles is actually able to get through to his old friend and change his ways. This is What If Professor X and Magneto founded the X-Men together?
At the X-Mansion, young Kitty Pryde finishes work on the schematics for a new version of a mutant detection computer when she realizes she's late for something. She phases through the wall to contact Charles Xavier, inadvertently losing her clothes in the process. Xavier exits the mansion and greets Dr. Hank McCoy, who has a comatose mutant named Jean Grey with him. Jean had been in a coma since her telepathic abilities were activated by the death of her friend Annie. However, Xavier's examination of the young mutant is interrupted by an attack. The group behind the attack is the Hellfire Club with their mutant-hunting robots known as the Sentinels. Several other mutants appear, including Wolverine and Mystique. However, Jean awakens and unleashes the full extent of her powers, the Phoenix. All of this is witnessed by Cyclops and Sabretooth, members of Mr. Sinister's Marauders.
For the longest time, the main threat to Victor Von Doom's conquest of the planet Earth has been Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four. But let's say things turned out different. Does that necessarily mean things are going to be better? This is What If Dr. Doom became the Thing?
Ben Grimm ribs his college buddy Reed Richards over the latter's budding romance with a student he's been mentoring, Sue Storm. Richards brushes the notion aside and enters his dorm room. Upon entering the room, the two find it covered with the scribblings of their roommate, Victor Von Doom. Doom has been trying to find a way to open a portal to an alternate dimension. Just as Reed notices a miscalculation in Victor's research, Doom enters the room. He throws Ben and Reed out despite the latter's protests, and Doom then returns to his research when he notices the same mistake that Reed did. Victor tracks Ben and Reed down and apologizes. He turns down Ben's offer to treat Reed and Victor to dinner, and leaves with Reed to continue his research. Time passes, and Ben drops out of college to join the military. Meanwhile, Reed and Victor begin work on technology that would allow for a manned mission to the moon. Joining them are Sue, who is now in a relationship with Reed, and her brother Johnny. Before the ship launches, Doom puts the moves on Sue and offers to cut Reed out if she joins him. Sue rebuffs Doom's advances, saying that she's in love with Reed. They then leave on the mission. Not too long after takeoff, the four fly into a storm of cosmic radiation. Doom then informs the others that he intentionally weakened the plating on the shuttle as he activates a special armor to absorb the radiation. The ship crashes. Reed, Sue, and Johnny emerge and immediately begin displaying their powers. This is interrupted by a cry from Victor. It turns out that his armor concentrated his exposure to the cosmic radiation. The armor begins to crack and open, revealing Victor's new flesh turning into rock. He then goes after Reed, blaming Richards for what has happened. The two fight and begin heading towards a rather familiar-looking testing site. They wind up crashing into Bruce Banner's gamma bomb. One man rushes out of the bunker to try and stop them, Sergeant Ben Grimm. Doom flees while Ben tosses Reed into the ditch just before the bomb goes off. Doom then returns and resumes attacking Reed in front of Ben, and Ben begins getting angry. Very angry. Ben Grimm transforms into the Incredible Hulk and begins taking on Doom. Sue and Johnny then arrive and the foursome aid each other in taking down Victor Von Doom. Afterwards, Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, and Ben Grimm found the Fantastic Four, consisting of Mr. Fantastic, the Invisible Woman, the Human Torch, and the Incredible Hulk.
The next story is a concept that's been done 3 previous times in the pages of What If. So yes, this is the rerun of a rerun of a rerun. Here's What If Aunt May had died instead of Uncle Ben.
Ben Parker arrives at his home to the news that his wife May surprised a burglar when she arrived home. The burglar shot May in response and fled the scene. Ben and May's nephew Peter return to receive the news just as the police get a radio call about the burglar being tracked down to an abandoned warehouse. Ben tries to calm Peter down as he stews over May's death. Finally, Peter snaps and rips open his shirt, revealing his identity as Spider-Man, and leaves after the police. Spider-Man goes to the warehouse and corners the burglar. It's then that Peter recognizes the man from an earlier robbery that he could have prevented. Peter unleashes a furious attack just as Ben arrives at the warehouse. Despite Ben's pleas, Peter tosses the burglar through a window where he falls to his death. The police rush into the warehouse as Ben tells Peter to stay in the shadows. Ben takes the fall for Peter as the police confront him. Ben is found guilty at the trial, though he's given a pretty lenient sentence, and Peter Parker becomes a ward of the state. Peter struggles to fit in at the various youth homes that he's sent to. Eventually, he escapes from one of them and tries to break Ben out of prison. Ben refuses and tells Peter that this isn't the way to use his abilities. That Peter needs to learn.
All together now.
With great power comes great responsibility. Ben arranges for the Parker's neighbor, Anna Watson, to take Peter in. Peter slowly begins to adjust, rededicating himself to his studies and even falling in love with Anna's niece, Mary Jane. Eventually, Ben Parker is paroled and he rejoins the newly married Peter and Mary Jane. Peter and Ben then begin working together, fighting crime as Spider-Man.
Well, technically this does end this collection of What If, Why Not? But we're not quite through yet. See, Marvel originally intended to publish a humor title called Waha, and certain production issues caused this issue to be delayed for over a year, so it was not collected in the original trade. But as you can see, I have a copy, and we're only going to cover a few of the more noteworthy stories in this, not every story involved. Also, we'll touch on one of the production issues when we come to it.
First off, we have What If the Fantastic Four actually made it to the moon? They wind up dying after forgetting to put on oxygen masks. After that, we have What If Marvel Heroes Aged in Real Time, featuring several septuagenarian superheroes. Up next, it's What If Stan Lee created Ultimate Spider-Man? And it's just a reprint of Amazing Fantasy 15. We then have What If the Black Panther was white? He gets kicked out of the Avengers due to an affirmative action violation. Then we have What If the Punisher was a pacifist? He tries to peacefully settle an argument between two thugs, only to wind up getting shot.
Okay, here's where we hit one of those production issues that caused this book to be delayed. Now, I can't 100% confirm this, but I do know that originally comedian Patton Oswalt did write a script that revolved around the Punisher getting his own Hostess Fruit Pie comic. Now, the script was originally filled with a lot of foul language, graphic violence, and even some sex. So I'm guessing either Marvel or Hostess said no. Or probably both of them said no.
The real scene stealers in this book involve what if internet forums existed at various points throughout history, in which shows fans' overreactions to story points from the past. In the 1960s, we have fans complaining about Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man leaving the Avengers, only to be replaced by 3 villains. Daredevil ditching his yellow costume, and the fact that Spider-Man is starting with a new number 1 instead of immediately picking up the numbering from Amazing Fantasy 15. In the 1970s, we have people complaining about the new X-Men lineup, Iron Man's costume getting a nose, and Marvel having more monster books like Tomb of Dracula and Werewolf by Night and not enough superhero titles. The 1980s have people whining about Daredevil being a ninja, the death of Jean Grey, and Tigra being an Avenger.
And so ends What If, Why Not, and What? And, well, Marvel would revisit the what if concept a few more times throughout the years, usually tying them into their major event storylines like Civil War or Secret Invasion. As for the story themselves, well, I think we should review each of them on a case-by-case basis. Okay, in What If Karen Page Had Lived, really the plus is there's really good artwork in this, and for the most part there's actually pretty believable characterization throughout this. The one major drawback involves the fact that this is eerily similar to a storyline that had run in the actual Daredevil comic, where Matt Murdock represented a superhero named White Tiger who was accused of murder. So, yeah, I'm going to give that one a C. Okay, I am going to admit, What If Thunderbolt Ross is probably my favorite of these stories. There's really great artwork throughout the whole thing. The characterization is pretty on point. There's not a lot of deviations except for the fact that General Ross becomes the Hulk. I think that's because Peter David is, one, experienced with writing the Hulk characters, and two, I'm pretty sure he's written a few what if stories. And I think that really added to the bonus of this. So yeah, this story gets an A. Okay, story 3 is What If Jessica Jones Joined the Avengers? And I know I'm getting repetitive here, but yeah, the artwork is really good throughout this story. Unfortunately, seeing Jessica end up with Captain America just feels really weird and uncomfortable, especially since this story was written by Brian Michael Bendis, the guy who created Jessica Jones and paired her up with Luke Cage. So to see Jessica end up with anyone other than Luke Cage just doesn't feel right. Also, this story is very kind of ho-hum and pedestrian, so yeah, I'm just going to give this one a D. Okay, the What If Charles Xavier and Magneto founded the X-Men together storyline is just terrible. I mean, Magneto really doesn't play a good role in this at all. The artwork is okay, but it's not spectacular. And to be honest, there's just way too much going on in this issue. This felt like a 2-issue story that really got condensed into one. I mean, do we really need the Mr. Sinister and the Marauders bits, and the Hellfire Club bits, and the Sentinel bits, and the Hank McCoy bits, and this bit, and yeah, see? Just way too much to keep track of. This story gets an F. Okay, story 5. What if Doctor Doom became the Thing? And as bizarre a premise as that sounds, I did kind of like this story for the most part. I think a lot of the characterization is still pretty on point. The artwork is, again, really good. I know I'm saying that a lot, but again, I'm reviewing individual stories on this case, so you're going to hear that. But I'd say my major drawback is Sue Storm and Johnny Storm as well don't really add anything to this story. They're just kind of along for the ride. Anyway, I'm going to give this story a B. Okay, story 5. What if Aunt May had died instead of Uncle Ben? Beating dead horse here, but yeah, the artwork is the best part of this story. And, well, other than that, unfortunately, this just feels really cliched and just very boring. Possibly because, again, this is a topic they've revisited several times throughout What If. Did we really need another incarnation of this story? I'm going to give this one an F. Okay, and our last story. What? Like I said, the jokes throughout this one are really funny for the most part. Unfortunately, I'd say the real drawback in that is that, one, the artwork for them looks really cartoony sometimes. I guess that's the thing with Jim Mahfood, the artist on the book. Also, a lot of the jokes are really based in continuity. If you don't know much about the Marvel Universe, you're not going to get a lot of them. And, though, I will say this on the plus side. Like I said, the fake internet forums are really the show stealers in this book for me, at least in this case. But that being said, I really can't recommend this to a new reader. So, yeah, I'm going to give this one at least a C. And so concludes our look at What If, Why Not, and Waha. Now, I guess I'm just going to have to give this book about a C. Like I said, there were some really good parts, and there were some, well, not so good parts. So, yeah, we'll just have to split the middle on that. And with that, let's take a look at what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.